Well, hello there, everybody. I wanted to just do a video over here because it got brought up in the comments the other day somehow. But I want to just talk about my time in the Marine Corps and just give you kind of a quick overview of what I did and just some of the things that I learned and some of the things that I took from the Marine Corps and still applied to my life today, and how I think I ultimately benefited from being in the Marine Corps. Okay, so first off, I served 4 years active duty from 2010 to 2014. My MOS was the 3521 Motor T mechanic, or Diesel Automotive Technician. Okay, I worked on Humvees mainly. I'll explain that in a second, because if you're in the Marine Corps, you're probably thinking Humvees. But we'll kind of talk about that. It had to do with my duty station where I was stationed. But first off, the beginning. So yes, I enlisted. It took about a year of waiting for a spot to open up in boot camp. Sometimes it gets like that. So I was almost waiting a year to actually go to boot camp from the time that I went to the recruiter's office. Okay, there was quite a bit of time I had to wait because I wanted to wait for my job opening as a mechanic to open up, and sometimes you have to wait for that. Otherwise, you might want to go to boot camp sooner, but you'll enlist on what they call an open contract, where it's kind of a lottery of what job you're going to get. And I'll tell you what, that lottery is a losing lottery. You're never going to get the job you want to get. Probably 9 times out of 10 if you enlist open contract. It's worth the wait of waiting for a spot in your MOS. Anyways, so 2010, I went to boot camp in San Diego, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. 13 weeks of boot camp there. Looking back, great experience. Looking back, you can laugh about it with your buddies. When you're there, it's definitely, it's quite a shock when you get there. You know what I mean? You get off the airport. I smoked cigarettes at the time, and I smoked my last. I was at the airport waiting for the bus from whatever. I think it's Los Angeles Airport, right? Whatever airport. There's a bus from the recruit depot that comes and picks you up, and I was smoking a cigarette outside when that bus pulled up. When it pulled up, I put my cigarette out, and that was the last cigarette I smoked for 13 weeks. And unfortunately, as soon as I finished boot camp, the first thing I did was smoke another cigarette. So I haven't smoked cigarettes for 6 years now, but yeah, that was. I'll tell you what. Maybe I should have been smart and just quit then, but I know me personally, I was ready to have a cigarette as soon as I could get one. But anyways, so yeah, boot camp for 13 weeks. Experience you'll probably never forget. A good experience ultimately, and I'll kind of talk about that a little later and how that benefits me today. But in general, just kind of being able to deal with discomfort and adapting to things that are out of your control, and being able to kind of go with the flow with things like that. Yeah, boot camp. So boot camp is kind of what we're doing there is just a breakdown. We're not doing the cool stuff like probably we're not doing the Call of Duty stuff in boot camp for the most part. You do shoot a rifle in boot camp, right? And yeah, you're crawling through under barbed wire and all that stuff, but it's more of establishing a baseline, teaching you what it's like to function in a top-down chain of command, operating under pressure, and just being comfortable, like I said, with being in discomfort, a lot of discomfort, with not just physically, but also your environment and your control of certain situations. It's being to operate outside of that and maintain your cool, you know. But yes, and then there is basic rifle skills and qualification where they're going to give you your M16, which I was one of the last companies actually to be issued the M16A2 in boot camp. Okay. I was literally, my platoon 2173, Hotel Company. My platoon was marching past new platoons coming in that had the M16A4s. Okay, so this is right when they were transitioning out. And, you know, there's all kinds of differences between the M16A2 and A4. The major difference was that the M16A2 was, you were shooting it with iron sights. Okay, so I qualified, and on our rifle qualification, you shoot up to 500 yards. And I qualified with iron sights doing that, which you know, I thought was cool. I think it's cool now, looking back, knowing that the next platoons were getting that, what it was called the RCO, or a version of an ACOG. Basically a 3-power magnification scope that's standard issue now in the Marine Corps. At least I don't believe that's changed as of 2023, but yeah, so as I'm, you know, qualifying with iron sights on the old school M16A2, there's guys walking past me with the M16A4 with a 3-power magnification. So it was cool to me to be one of those last platoons to learn to shoot with those iron sights and qualify with those, you know. And also the M16A2, if you know anything about it, is just such a cool retro, what do you want to call it? Just a, I don't know, it's just a classic rifle, you know. Who doesn't love the A2? But anyway, so yeah, I did my time in boot camp. You know, got through that fine, no issues. I graduated squad leader coming out of boot camp, which is, you know, no major feat. It's just a thing. But I got that because I was really good at hiking. And I've always been really good at hiking. And we're doing a hump, you know, and our current squad leader was holding it was like basically a flag with our platoon number on it. And he started falling out of the hike, and I was really good at hiking. So I ran up, and our senior drill instructor, he yelled something. He's like, "Someone come get this, you know, guide." It's called a guidon. The flag is called a guidon. But he yelled, "Someone come get this thing." So I hiked up and I got it, and then I was squad leader from there on. So, you know, I guess all that time in scouts of hiking around and backpacking paid off. So, yeah, so boot camp, nothing really compares to boot camp, you know. It's a very interesting experience. But from there, after boot camp, you go on to what's called MCT. And MCT, or Marine Combat Training, goes along with this is kind of where the Marine Corps is unique from other parts of the service. Because in the Marine Corps, you may have heard the saying before, the saying of every Marine is a rifleman. And what that means is every Marine, no matter if you work in an office or you're a mechanic like I was, you have the basic skills to be a rifleman and go out and fight if needed. So after we go to boot camp, before we go to our school, where after this I go to my school to learn how to be a mechanic in the Marine Corps, before that, we all get some basic combat training. And this is where you do the cool stuff, the video game stuff. You shoot M249s, you shoot M203 grenade launchers, you're shooting, you know, with NVGs, with night vision goggles on, and, you know, doing all that fun stuff, practicing clearing rooms, and, you know, that combat simulation stuff, all the fun stuff, right? That's what MCT was. So yeah, went through that. Had some fun there. Had a little more freedom coming out of boot camp, but still kind of the leash was on there a little bit. Not nearly like boot camp though. So that was like the first getting out of boot camp, and now you're doing cool stuff and you're starting to feel a little better about the whole thing. Because coming out of boot camp, you're pretty revved up. But so then after combat training, that's when I go to my MOS school. And that's my job school, which is in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Okay. And that's where I went to Camp Johnson, which is part of Camp Lejeune. There in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And that's where I did my time where I went through school on how to work on, some of the vehicles in the Marine Corps. But basically, not so much the specific vehicles themselves, more so, how to go through the processes of working on the vehicles. It was almost more of a basic class for someone that didn't know how to work on anything, which I kind of, I'd been mechanicking on stuff through high school, and I was really into working in cars at the time. And that's why I enlisted in the Marine Corps as a mechanic, because I really enjoyed doing it at the time. So I was already kind of on page with what to do, as long as a lot of the guys, there were some guys that, signed up open contract and did the lottery, where they said, hey, Marine Corps, I want to go now. You give me a job. And then they were getting in there, and it was a guy that had never turned a wrench in his life. And so, I mean, and you know what? I knew some guys like that. One of my best buddies in the Marine Corps, actually. And turned out to be a fine mechanic. He could get stuff done. You know what I mean? So that was MOS school, right? So that's your job school. MOS standing for Military Occupational Specialty. And again, my designator was 3521, which was Diesel Automotive Technician. 3500 being the motor transportation field, or motor T, and then 21 being that mechanic job. So I get out of my job school, right? We do all that, and now I go to what will be actually my only duty station. Okay, duty station being, okay, now you're trained up, you've been through boot camp, you've been through your combat training, you've been through your MOS school. Now it's on to where you're going to be working, right? What base are you going to be working at? Either training with a unit and then deploying or whatever. So I ended up at what's called TBS, or the basic school. And it is connected to Quantico, Virginia. Quantico is the headquarters of the Marine Corps. Okay? You might have heard of Quantico in shows like CSI. The FBI trains on actually TBS, our side of base. But that's where officers go through essentially their boot camp. All right. So I was an enlisted rank. I was a corporal. I made it to corporal. But there's enlisted rank and there's officer rank. Think of it like blue collar and white collar. So captains, lieutenants, majors, generals, stuff like that. Those are officers. And then private, lance corporal, corporal, sergeant, staff sergeant, gunnery sergeant. That's enlisted rank. So it's like a blue collar, white collar thing is probably the easiest thing to relate it to as a civilian. Okay. So yeah, and that's where I was stationed. I was stationed on the base where the officers come to do their basic training. And remember, in the Marine Corps, you go through and have your basic training, and then you go on to like your combat training. Well, Quantico was where officers did their basic training, and this is I'm simplifying this a lot. And then TBS, the base I worked at, was where officers came to do their quote-unquote combat training. They learned their land nav, and they'd learn some, they'd be out there playing with the laser things mounted on the M16s and shooting blanks at each other and all that stuff. So I worked on the vehicles that they used in training. That's what my unit was in charge of, fixing the Humvees and the 7 tons that were used in training by the officers. And interestingly enough, that was a 3-year duty station. So by the time I get there, I only have about 3 years and some change left. So I'm spending the rest of my 4 years there in Quantico, which is a interesting duty station. You know, I didn't end up deploying. You know, I'd be lying if I said I had joined the Marine Corps and didn't want to deploy. If you probably ask most people I joined the Marine Corps, I would say that's probably, I don't know what some people say. Most guys that I know that didn't deploy wish they deployed, but it's like, you know, we don't know what we're saying. You know what I mean? We're all young. We're 22. We're like, man, send me anywhere. You know what I mean? So ultimately, yeah, I'm probably pretty glad I didn't freaking deploy. But at the same time, you know what I'm saying. But yeah, so I stayed in there, had some fun there, got to participate in some officer training exercises, which are fun. They had the combat towns built out of those shipping containers. They had literally combat towns built out of these shipping containers. They had these shipping containers built, stacked up to make buildings. It was very cool. So got to do some cool stuff there and all that. Yeah, and that's where I spent my Marine Corps career. So that took me out, and you know, so now let's talk about how the Marine Corps, I think, benefits me today. Like going back to, like I said, in boot camp, learning to live with discomfort physically, mentally, emotionally, and be able to adapt to the things in front of you when they're out of your control. And also being able to, you know, like if you're at work and the boss comes at you and throws down that extra stack of papers, or, you know, or you're at the concrete plant, for instance, like when I was working, and there's one of the silos is clogged up, and you're like just about to go home, but now you got to stay for probably an extra 2 hours and fix this thing. Things like that, you learn to, you have that moment, and then you're just like, okay, we're here, let's just do it. Let's do it. Let's get it done. I'll be okay. You know what I mean? Also, like I said, physical discomfort, you know, being able to kind of, like I said, just kind of keep it together when life in general just gets stressful. You know, if you can handle boot camp, then you can handle, you know, being short on bills for the month or whatever. You know, you can get through it. So, things like that, I'd say it definitely has benefited me, right? Ultimately, I enjoyed my time. There were much of the time while you're in. It's one of those things where it seems to suck while you're in a lot of the time, but when you're out, you miss it a lot. You miss your buddies. You have these relationships with these guys. You know, you're going out to the bar with your best friend from Jersey, with a guy from Georgia, and with a guy who is originally from Vietnam, and is from Texas. You know what I'm saying? You guys are all going out to the bar together, drinking pitchers of beer, and, you know, just developing a camaraderie, which I still have buddies I talk to. I got a really good friend, and we talk all the time. And it's just an experience that I wouldn't trade. All right. I definitely wouldn't trade it. I'm glad I did it. And, you know, otherwise, I've rambled on about enough in here. For any Marines out there watching, you know what I mean? Semper Fi and all that good stuff. And for all you watching out there, you know, thank you for your support of being a citizen. So, you know what I mean? Yeah, it was a good time. Don't regret it. Had a great time. I'm glad I did it. I'll tell you what, I was 20 when I joined. 4 years seemed like nothing. So I'd highly recommend it to any young kid. You know, sure, it probably has downsides. Nowadays, it sounds like it's getting kind of wacky, but I think ultimately you'll be glad you did it. So with that, thanks for watching, everyone. We'll be seeing you soon, and I hope you're doing well. Appreciate you.